All right, racers, so you just finished up practice, or maybe you just got off the track from your first heat. What do you do next? Do you go over to your buddy's pit and, make fun of him for that lousy pass he tried to make on you? Perhaps you go over to the snack stand, grab a soda or something like that. Well, there's something that you should really get in the habit of, and I'm not just talking about going and trying some setup changes or maybe thinking about changing tires. What you should really get in the habit of is doing a post-race maintenance check. So that's what this video is about. I've come up with 10 tips on post-race maintenance checks that you should really consider doing before you head out for your next heat. Let's get right into it. Alright, so post-race check number 1 is checking the tire bead. Yep, that area that you glued the tire to the rim, you got to check that all the way around both sides. Now, there's a number of reasons why you need to do it. First reason is handling. When you go around a corner, the tire starts to roll and it pulls that bead off and it can cause inconsistent handling. Number 2 is if it starts to pull off, it's probably got to pull off some more and that could cause a problem. You might not finish a race. Number 3 is dirt could get inside the tire and it starts to wear away at the foam and just ruins the tire in general. So you really want to catch the problem ahead of time and re-glue the bead. Now don't just go throw some more glue on it. You need to clean the bead, you need to clean the rim, you need to clean the tire itself. Use a good cleaner like Simple Green or a good motor spray from CowRC. That's what we use. And then get a good quality glue and re-glue the bead. Alright, so on to tip number 2, and I'm going to use the same wheel for the demonstration. Now when you get off the track, make sure that the wheel nuts on your car are tight. If they're not, you want to check your wheel hexes. What happens is sometimes a wheel nut could back off, or a wheel hex could just stretch, and so you want to check the wheel hexes often. What happens if you don't check them? Well, the wheel hex could start to spin in the rim, and then it destroys the rim, and then you're out a set of wheels and tires. Check number 3 has to deal with the shocks, more specifically the spring collars, and making sure that they didn't back off during the race. So what I like to do is I like to take my calipers and just measure the distance between the top of the shock collar and the ridge of the shock body, just to make sure that the distance is equal from side to side. Now you don't want to go through all that tuning to find out there's a spring collar that backed off during the race, and that may have caused a little bit of a handling inconsistency. Alright, so check number 4 is making sure that your suspension moves freely. Now, if you hit a lot of walls or smash into some pipes, you probably want to check your suspension often. So what I like to tell people to do is remove a shock and then just simply make sure that your suspension drops nice and freely, that there's no bind or anything. If you feel a little bind, you might need to clean out the suspension holes or polish the hinge pins, or if you kind of feel like a bump in the suspension, well, maybe you have a bent hinge pin, and in that case, you just should replace the pin so your suspension works nice and smooth. Okay, we're halfway through here, and checking your turnbuckles is tip number 5. And there's actually 2 checks I want you to do here. First thing I want you to do is physically check to make sure that your turnbuckle isn't bent. If you're hitting a lot of walls on the track, you may have bent a turnbuckle, and that will change your camber. The other check I want you to do is actually take a camber gauge and make sure the camber is equal from side to side. Some impacts can change the length of a camber rod. So if that's the case, what you want to do is you want to take your turnbuckle wrench and make sure that your camber is equal from side to side. Do the adjustments. Now, if it keeps happening, that may mean that your ball ends are worn out on the turnbuckle and you'll have to replace the ball ends, or you'll just keep on making adjustments. Check number 6 is making sure that your pinion and spur mesh are just fine. Now, the reason why you have to keep on checking this is because your motor is adjustable, and because of that, there's a chance for it to slip. So after every race, you just want to check to make sure that your pinion and spur mesh is where it needs to be. While you're taking a look at it, make sure there's no pebbles or other debris in there that could cause the gears to get damaged. Check number 7 is about going over your wiring. Now, after a race, take a look at all of the wires on your car. Make sure none of the wires moved perhaps into a driveline component and were chewed up. Make sure that none of your servo wires are backing out of the receiver, and also check your sensor wires. Make sure that there's no fraying. Make sure everything's plugged in fine. If you notice a little bit of a sporadic loss of power from your brushless system, it may be because you have a sensor wire going bad. Now, check number 8 can be a little time consuming because that's going over all the hardware on your car. You should check the hardware often, even if you did thread lock some of the screws. The cars go through a lot of abuse when they're on a track, and that causes hardware to back out. So you just want to take your good set of tools and go over the car to make sure that the hardware is nice and tight. Really focus on the motor, make sure it's fine, the motor mount's fine. Your shock screws, that's another area that tends to back out. Even sometimes the screws that hold the diff cases down to the chassis could back out. So just take the time, go over the hardware, and make sure everything is nice and tight. So check number 9 is taking a good look at your ball bearings. Ball bearings take a ton of abuse inside cars. You got the power of the driveline wrenching on them. You got them outside getting covered with dirt and debris by the wheels. So they take a lot of abuse. So you want to check them often. You want to clean them off with a brush, maybe even spray them down with a good motor spray, and make sure that you re-oil them. Now, if they do look like they're possibly wearing out, you do want to replace them. If they do blow out, they'll wreak havoc on other parts. So when I feel it's time to replace bearings in my car, what I like to do is head over to fasteddiebearings.com. You've got a great website with pretty much every car out there listed on the site and a bearing set for it, and I know he's got it in stock all the time. And finally, number 10 of our post-race maintenance checks, and that's checking your differential to make sure it's working properly. So basically, if you have a ball differential, hold the spur gear and just rotate the wheels to make sure that the diff feels nice and smooth. If it feels like you're smuggling rocks inside your diff, it's probably time for a rebuild. Probably need some new thrust bearings and probably some new diff balls as well. So just double check your diff. It is a major performance component in the car. If you have a gear differential, take a look to make sure that no oil is seeping around from the out drives, or even if you notice some oil under the bottom of your chassis because it's leaking through the differential case, you know you have a differential problem. You know it's time to rebuild your differential. I hope you found these checks useful. If you add these tips to your track routine, I think you'll spend a lot more time concentrating on driving and less time worrying about if your car is going to hold together. Thanks for watching. Please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our upcoming how-to videos.